Hello?
Hello?
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good, because my phone accidentally did something. But, okay, we should be good to go now. All right. Welcome to the webinar. I'm the moderator for today's webinar. I'm Ashley Charlton, the Development Coordinator for PearlPoint Cancer Support. Let me introduce you to our speakers. Gail Sperling, Senior Manager, Information Research Center of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. In her present role, Gail oversees call center staff working remotely throughout the country, and she provides resources and referrals to ensure that all IRC callers, whether patients or caregivers, have access to up-to-date disease and treatment information, as well as needed support services anytime during their cancer journey. She also presently serves as the North America representative to the CML Advocates, an international CML organization. Previously, for 13 years, Gail served as a patient services manager and community outreach manager in 2 of LLS's Southern California chapters. In these roles, Gail led efforts to conduct outreach with the community and coordinate a variety of disease and patient-focused programs. She also worked closely with cancer centers, medical groups, and community oncology practices to increase awareness and utilization of LLS programs and services. Additionally, Gail has served on a number of county and statewide cancer coalitions. Gail draws her inspiration and passion for her work with the LLS from her mother, Bernice, and friend, Diane, both of whom she lost to blood cancer. Next, Margaret Martin, PearlPoint's nutrition educator and registered dietitian. Margaret Martin is a licensed dietitian and nutritionist in the state of Tennessee, as well as a certified diabetes educator. Margaret graduated from the University of Alabama with a Bachelor of Science in Dietetics and received her master's degree in Nutrition, Science, and Public Health from the University of Tennessee. She has more than 10 years of experience in clinical nutrition. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit in the panel on the right side of your screen. Our presenter will be answering questions after the presentation. Connect with us on Twitter at MyPearlPoint. Use the hashtag #PPCSWebinar. After the webinar, complete the survey so we can improve our webinars and better serve you. Here you can take a quick look at our agenda for today. We'd also like to take a moment to thank the Memorial Foundation for helping make today's webinar possible. A quick disclaimer, PearlPoint Cancer Support is not a treatment facility. We are a nonprofit organization that provides education and resources for cancer survivors. The webinar does not provide medical care. Always talk to your healthcare team before changing your diet or if you're having any side effects from treatment. So who is PearlPoint Cancer Support? We are a nonprofit cancer organization with the mission to create a more confident cancer journey for adults anytime, anywhere. We've been serving survivors, co-survivors, and healthcare professionals for over 28 years. We provide education and resources through MyPearlPoint, a website dedicated to educating cancer survivors. Our main focuses are cancer education, clinical trials, nutrition, and survivorship. Visit MyPearlPoint after the webinar to create a free dashboard and receive personalized resources such as the Cancer Handbook, which we currently have available for multiple cancer types, including breast, lung, stomach, pancreatic, colorectal, esophageal, liver, and others. You can also learn more about cancer side effect management by watching the Eat to Fight video series. On the home page, click on the Nutrition and Cancer section to find the videos. The mission of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is cure leukemia, lymphoma, Hodgkin's disease, and myeloma, and increase the quality of life of patients and their families. LLS exists to find cures and ensure access to treatments for blood cancer patients. We are the voice for all blood cancer patients, and we work to ensure access to treatments for all blood cancer patients. Now I'll go ahead and hand things over to Gail.
There's my picture. Thank you, Ashley. It's really my pleasure to be on this call today and to share information. I've titled my program Chronic Myeloid Leukemia CML, Just the Facts, because I do hope to present just the facts, of which there are many, so let's get started. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a busy agenda today. First of all, I want to talk about what is CML, causes and risk factors, signs and symptoms. I want to talk about how CML is diagnosed, the phases of CML, treatment options, side effects, the huge importance of monitoring CML, some of the adherence issues, and then finish up with some resources. Next slide, please. So this is a slide with a lot of words, but I included it here so that you could begin to have an understanding of just how complex CML is. People with CML have an abnormal chromosome called the Philadelphia chromosome. As you probably remember from your high school biology, everybody has 23 pairs of chromosomes. And the PH chromosome is the result of a translocation between chromosomes 22 and 9. That means they switch places. So this actual translocation leads to the development of a cancer-causing gene called an oncogene, called the BCR-ABL gene. And we'll see this a little bit better on the next slide. This BCR oncogene tells the stem cell in the bone marrow to make this dysfunctional protein called a tyrosine kinase. Hold on to that word, tyrosine kinase, which then leads to the development of CML. And this tyrosine kinase tells it to keep on making it and making it and making it. So once the marrow cell undergoes this leukemic change, the cells actually have survival value. So they actually grow better and survive better than normal cells do. And what happens is this uncontrolled growth of cells, white blood cells, causes a large increase in their concentration in the blood. And then over time, these white blood cells actually crowd out healthy red blood cells and platelets as well as normal white cells, and then you begin to have some effects on your health. Okay, next slide, please. So just to elaborate a bit on this PH chromosome, as I said, most cases start when a swapping of chromosomal material, DNA, actually occurs between chromosomes 9 and 22. I mentioned that this is a location and it leads to the formation of this BCR-ABL, which then gives rise to this protein called the tyrosine kinase. So hopefully you can see that the BCR-ABL oncogene is a small part of 22 and a small part of 9, and it's a shorter chromosome called the Philadelphia chromosome. And obviously it's called Philadelphia because it was doctors at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia actually discovered this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So most people who have CML are actually adults, and the incidence increases with age, as you can see from this slide. So it's very, in the first 40 years of life, it's pretty rare, although we're beginning to see more and more. And so it's definitely a later part of life diagnosis. And only a small percentage are children and young adults. It actually represents just about 3% of newly diagnosed childhood leukemia, so it's pretty low. In 2015, CML will account for about 11% of the new cases of blood cancers, or approximately 6,600 new cases. The prevalence has increased dramatically since the 2000s, so there's a huge survival value now based on some of our treatments, as we'll see in a few minutes. And so the 8-year overall survival now, the 8-year survival probability is around 80%, and compared to what it was in the early 2000s, that is just huge. So next slide, please. Before we launch into signs and symptoms, I do just want to briefly touch on some of the causes and risk factors for CML. For most people who have it, there are no obvious reasons why they develop this disease. No one's born with CML. It happens when there's some kind of an injury to the DNA of a single bone marrow cell. So far, we only know 2 known risk factors, and they are exposure to very high doses of radiation, such as the atomic blast or what happened during Hiroshima or Nagasaki in World War II, and also high-dose radiation that's been used to treat other cancers such as lymphoma. However, we know that most people treated for cancer with radiation don't develop CML, and most people with CML were never exposed to high-dose radiation. So, and the proportion of people who are actually exposed to radiotherapy and develop CML is actually quite small. So, next slide, please. CML is a very slow-growing disease and does not completely interfere with the development of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, at least initially. So for this reason, patients that may have CML may not have any symptoms. But in general, as I said, those symptoms tend to develop pretty slowly, and they include fatigue. I think fatigue is probably the most pronounced symptom. A shortness of breath. This may be because of the decreased number of circulating red blood cells picking up oxygen. There may be weight loss. There may be an enlarged spleen because of the breakdown of the white blood cells. Paleness, again, from the lack of red blood cells. Night sweats, and then just this kind of vague inability to tolerate warm temperatures. So those are some of the initial symptoms. Next slide, please. So, a CML diagnosis is usually made with information from both blood and bone marrow tests, and so we're going to talk a little bit about those now. As far as blood tests go, a complete blood count will often show if there's a decrease in the red blood cell and an increased white blood cell and increased or decreased platelets. So that's what one of the things they're looking for when they do a blood draw. When they look at the cells under a microscope, it will show what they call blast cells, or very immature or very functionless cells, which are just normally not present in the blood of healthy individuals. As for a bone marrow aspiration and biopsy, they're used to find abnormalities and are generally done at the same time. And they do a cytogenetic analysis and measure the number and the structure of the chromosomes, and that's going to give them the information that they're looking for. So about 90% of people with CML have that PH chromosome that we talked about earlier, detectable by cytogenetic analysis. A small percentage do not, but they almost always test positive for that BCR fusional gene on chromosome 22 when they use other kinds of tests. A FISH, or fluorescence in situ hybridization, is a more sensitive method of detecting CML than the standard cytogenetic tests. And it's what they call a quantitative test and can identify BCR-able genes in chromosomes. The polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later, is the most sensitive molecular testing that we have available. It can be done on either blood or marrow, and it can determine a very small number of CML cells. About 1 cell in 1 million can be detected by PCR testing, and it's really become kind of the gold standard for testing. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So there are 3 phases of CML, and most people, I would say about 80 to 90%, are diagnosed with chronic phase CML. And again, as we said before, they may or may not have symptoms. Their cells can still mature into functioning white blood cells and platelets, and once they begin treatment, symptoms will generally subside and they can go back to their normal activities. So that's chronic phase. People with accelerated phase have further changes to their blood count. They may have chromosomal changes or mutations. They're probably going to have more pronounced symptoms, and such as fatigue and that enlarged spleen, and probably a loss of well-being. Blast crisis is when the number of blast cells increases in both the bone and blood marrow. The blood and bone marrow, I should say, I'm sorry, and they have low red blood cell counts, platelets, and some white blood cell counts that are not the lymphocytes. Blast cells are spread outside the blood and into other tissues, and if you're in a blast crisis, you're a sick individual. Symptoms are much more pronounced. It's sort of a blast crisis, almost looks like an acute leukemia. Next slide, please. So what are our treatment goals? For people with chronic phase CML, the goals of treatment are to return the level of blood cells to normal and kill all the cells that have the BCR-ABL cancer gene. Sounds pretty direct. Then this is followed by a very concerted effort to reduce or eliminate the CML cells altogether. So for people in blast crisis, if they're diagnosed in blast crisis, the goal is still to kill all those cells that contain the BCR-ABL gene and return the disease to the chronic phase. So it's important for us to know as we're moving through this today that CML is not a one-size-fits-all diagnosis, and treatment for each patient really does have to be customized based on the phase of diagnosis, the test results, the risk scores, and a person's age, particularly when it comes to different treatment options. So next slide, please. So since I just mentioned the initial goal in treating chronic phase CML is to restore the blood counts to normal. That's the #1 goal. Then oncologists really look for a more pronounced reduction or elimination of those CML cells altogether. So here come the TKIs. So the tyrosine kinase inhibitors, affectionately called TKIs. So this crazy protein made by this BCR-ABL gene that causes the uncontrolled growth of CML cells is called a tyrosine kinase. So tyrosine kinase inhibitors are drugs that target this protein, and TKIs inhibit or actually block this protein from sending the signal to quote-unquote grow. So it interferes with that process. 3 TKIs have been identified as initial or first-line treatment. They're listed there. They are imatinib, dasatinib, and nilotinib, also known as Gleevec, Sprycel, and Tasigna. If initial therapy and subsequent treatments, some of the second-line treatments don't work, there are third-line treatments, including other things like bosulif, bosutinib, ponatinib, and iclusig. And those are specifically targeting what we call the T315I mutation. We'll talk a little more in a minute about that as well. Next slide, please. Other drugs, and I just include these here briefly, but other drugs include Cinreblo, which is a protein synthesis inhibitor for adults who may be in chronic or accelerated phase, who just are not responding to at least 2 or more previous treatments with TKIs, and it's given by an injection under the skin. And I think this is probably, excuse me, a good time to just briefly discuss what we mean by resistance or intolerance. And resistance is, some of you probably know, is when a cancer cells continue to grow even after treatment. So CML can become resistant to TKIs. It may be due to a mutation. It may be due to other factors, but they can become resistant to a treatment, and it may no longer work. Intolerance implies that, a patient has experienced some kind of an adverse reaction, or maybe is having intolerable side effects from the drug. For whatever reason, they're just not able to continue taking this medication. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So for advanced, I include these briefly, but for advanced and blast crisis phase CML patients, there are also treatments, including, what you see here, the Gleevec, the Sprycel, Cinreblo, and then I just wanted to mention briefly a little bit about stem cell transplantation. So we'll take a look at that on the next slide. Thank you. I have to be honest, stem cell transplantation could be a subject all on its own, but I do just want to touch on a couple of key points. Allogeneic stem cell transplantation, allo, is a procedure where stem cells from another person, a donor, are infused into the patient's body. So prior to the emergence of the TKIs in the early 2000s, Allo stem cell transplantation was the principal means of treatment for patients of an appropriate age, in general good health, and of course with an available donor. It's still a treatment option for some patients who are first diagnosed or those who might progress to more advanced phases of CML. But many patients today have such a good response to TKIs, and although a stem cell transplant can be curative and TKIs are not, they are able to control the disease for long periods and preserve what we call the quality of life to a greater extent than a transplant. And that seems to be the general consensus among CML experts at this time. So I've seen a huge drop away from stem cell transplantation. Next slide, please. So TKIs have truly revolutionized treatment for CML, but each has its side effects. And like all medications, those side effects depend on the patient's age and the patient's current state of health, the type of drug that's being used, and of course the dosage. Many of the side effects can be managed, and often the benefits of CML remission, being free of the disease, will outweigh the risks of the risk of the side effects. But I have to be honest, they definitely exist. Patients talk about them all the time, and all you have to do is ask anyone on a TKI, and they will let you know that there are side effects. So the listing of side effects on the next few slides is not intended to be exhaustive in any way, but it does hopefully give a general idea. We do know that many side effects go away over time, or they become less noticeable, and hopefully most can be handled without the need to stop the drug. This is one of those areas where we always encourage patients to be sure they're talking to their doctors about possible side effects, because again, they're important for quality of life, and especially because we want to make sure always that patients are sticking with their treatment regimen. So if you just want to move through the next slide, please. So those are the side effects for Gleevec. For Sprycel, I've highlighted in red some of the more serious side effects of Sprycel. A physician, or an oncologist, I should say, who specializes in CML will be aware of these potential complications, specifically pleural effusion and pulmonary arterial hypertension. Next slide is Tasigna. Tasigna is actually Novartis is the manufacturer, is Novartis's second generation of Gleevec, and excuse me, in a one-to-one comparison with Gleevec, most of the side effects reported were reported less commonly in patients treated with Tasigna. Still, there are some serious possible cardiac effects, and so once again, proper monitoring is especially important, and I've specifically highlighted this QT prolongation and the peripheral arterial occlusive disease, so just something that oncologists will be very well aware of. Next slide, please. Boswellia and Iclusig also have a series of side effects that are including some severe vascular events that need to be managed with appropriate medication. However, these drugs right now are only prescribed for patients for whom none of the other TKI therapies is working. So just wanted to mention that. Next slide, please. All right, we get into monitoring CML treatment response, which is pretty complex, so I'm going to kind of try and move through this, but then always refer you to some really good resources that we have available through the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. So measuring and monitoring treatment response is a hugely important part of ongoing follow-up care with CML. So a CBC, a complete blood count, is going to measure the number of white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. We know that that's important for general health and well-being. Cytogenetic testing is, again, going to test the blood or the bone marrow to see that organization of chromosomes and help us identify the Philadelphia chromosome. And the standardized PCR test, polymerase chain reaction, which I've highlighted here in red, is probably the most important testing that we have today. It's so important because the deeper the level of response to treatment, the greater the reduction in that BCR-ABL, the harder it actually becomes to detect any amount of BCR-ABL that might still remain. So enter the PCR test. That is very precise, it's very sensitive, and it is the most accurate test to detect even very, very small amounts in the blood or bone marrow. As I mentioned earlier, it can detect 1 cell out of a million, and it can be done either on blood or on bone marrow cells. So the advantage here is it does not require a bone marrow aspiration, and patients will tell you that's a huge advantage. The other thing about the PCR is that it's really used to monitor treatment milestones over time, and we'll talk about those in the next slide. And I just really want to emphasize that it's one of the best indications of how well patients are responding to treatment is this standardized PCR. Next slide, please. So measuring, as I said, measuring response is vital. So the first type of response the oncologist is looking for is what is called a hematologic response. It's measured through a blood count with a differential. They look for those blood counts to return to normal. There's no more blast cells, those immature functionless cells in the blood. And if the spleen was enlarged, that it's returned to a normal size. The spleen filters the blood and maintains healthy red and white blood cells. So if that's enlarged, there's clearly something going on. And so hopefully we're returning that spleen to its normal size. A cytogenetic response is then measured, as I said, through the bone marrow. And we're looking for what's called a complete cytogenetic response, a CCYR, where there are no PH chromosomes detected. Then the ultimate response is a molecular response, and again, measured through the quantitative PCR using what's called IS, or the International Scale. And that's hugely important because reductions in the level of this BCR gene are reported as what they call log reductions and expressed as percentages, as you see in the last sentence here. So a person's CML drug therapy is measured against that person's results at the start of treatment. So that's sort of their baseline results. And although this can get pretty technical, I just want you to know a 1 log reduction means that the levels have decreased by 10 times below the standardized baseline, and that would be a cytogenetic response. A 2 log reduction means that it's decreased to 100 times below, and a 3 log reduction means that the levels have decreased to 1,000 times below the standardized baseline, and it equals that 0.1%, and it's also known as a major molecular response. So on the next slide, I tried to take this, put it together in a, so what does this mean? I actually borrowed this slide from a recent teleconference facilitated by Dr. Cortez out of MD Anderson, and I think that what it does is it just really clarifies what we're looking for in terms of responses. So with a complete hematologic response, we're definitely looking at improved symptoms. The spleen's smaller and the counts are normal. A complete cytogenetic response leads to significantly improved survival. The major molecular response, modest improvement in event-free survival, so that means there won't be any other issues that come up, and possible longer duration. And then of course the ultimate, the complete molecular response, where now in 2015 there is the possibility of considering treatment discontinuation, which is something I'll touch on again in just a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. So there are different guidelines for CML drug therapy, and as I mentioned, very specific milestones that should be met at different intervals, at 3 months, at 6 months, at 12 months, at 18 months, and beyond. So the blood and these testing is hugely important to determine. Your oncologist wants to determine if there's a need to increase the dose of the medication, decrease or stop it briefly if there's side effects. is there a need to change the drug or combination to get a better control? Or is there a need to change a drug combination because of side effects? So a lot of information comes out of these counts. So you can really see that within 12 months, if you look at that, they want to see some major changes. And I think this is hugely important, and I just don't have time to review it today, but there are some guidelines available in our CML booklet, and I will point out our booklet in an upcoming slide. They're also available on our LLS website. And so I want to make sure that people on the call today know that. Next slide, please. It is important just to mention a little bit about gene mutation testing, because if any of those tests talked about previously show that the patient may be losing a response to a drug therapy, then additional tests might be ordered. So let's say you're not meeting a treatment milestone on time, or if there's that loss of response, even though the patient has been consistent with medication, or anytime there's a concern about the treatment not working, the physician or the oncologist may order a gene mutation test. And it's important to know that that BCR-ABL protein is a smart little bugger, and is trying to make the CML resistant to a TKI. So this mutation test could help determine why one drug may work, another may not. Sprycel and Tasigna right now work against most mutations, but they don't work equally well against other mutations. So this mutation test can help with your oncologist make determinations. So next slide, please. One of our important things is to make sure that patients take their medication to get the best result. So stopping medication or taking less than prescribed can really impact how well the medication works and can result in a loss of response. And studies are now focusing on the importance of what we call adherence, which means taking medication exactly as it's prescribed and consistently. So that means every day exactly as prescribed. And like any disease, CML follow-up care is really important. It requires close communication with the oncologist, and we always encourage patients to discuss any barriers to taking, the medication as prescribed. If there's some, people might say, I'm going to skip it because I'm going out of town, or whatever there might be. But the importance of taking it cannot be overemphasized. So I've included one strategy here for monitoring progress, and these include these CML tracker pages, which are available online, and they're used to record appointments and blood work and symptoms and side effects. I find that most patients have their own system for doing this, keeping track of all their CML tests and lab results, and of course the importance of maintaining regular follow-up. Sometimes I ask patients if they have children, and and I talk about their relationship with the pediatrician, even if it was years ago, and I say that relationship you have with your pediatrician is just as important as the relationship you have with your oncologist. It's a relationship of trust, and you really need to be able to have open communication with your oncologist. So next slide, please. And so just some important topics I'd love to be able to cover in our next webinar. I know I don't have time today, but CML and pregnancy is a whole new area of research, resistant and refractory CML. I did mention treatment cessation. There are actually discontinuation trials going on now where patients who have a very deep response to some of their TKIs are actually able to go on a trial and be off their medication. Generics, when I mean generics, the patent on Gleevec expired actually this past summer, and we expect to see our first generics sometime in 2016. Actually, generics are widely used internationally, so in Europe and India there's a wide array of different kinds of generics for Gleevec. Certainly the idea of adherence issues, children and young adults with CML, because we're beginning to see more and more of them, and then some of the new drugs that will be on the horizon because we're making just dramatic strides with CML. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to spend our last few minutes talking about the Leukemia Lymphoma Society website. I always kind of consider it a best kept secret. And there really is access to a wealth of resources, and most are available really with just one click. So you can see, it may not be that easy to see, but I've highlighted the resources area at the top of the website as a drop-down: disease information, support, resources, and education. And then, of course, you can click on any of those to get to other information. So next slide, please. I just wanted to mention briefly that we have free education booklets. All of our materials are free. That's the fast link or friendly link is the publications. We have telephone and web education programs. We do have some education videos, online chats. We have a CML online chat. We have a CML online discussion board. It is the most active of all of our discussion boards. I monitor it, and the questions and the concerns and the sharing and the experience is really vast, and I always encourage patients and family members to check our discussion board. We do have a peer-to-peer support group called First Connection, and then just local support groups that might be in the community. Next slide, please. This is a slide of our PCR video that can be accessed on our website, and it's intended to help patients understand the importance of PCR monitoring. So feel free to check this out. Next slide, please. We have some printable question guides that you can be accessed at www.lls.org, what to ask. In the upper right-hand corner, I'm not sure if you can see it that well, but it's a printable guide for patients to ask their CML physician. So you can actually print out a series of questions for patients to use when they're meeting with their physicians. Next page, please. Next slide, I should say. And then I wanted to briefly talk about our financial program, financial assistance program for patients with CML. It's a PCR reimbursement program. And by now you've heard me say repeatedly that the PCR is the most important test. It's usually conducted every 3 months, or so actually multiple times per year, and because it can find very small numbers of CML. The average cost for this PCR can be anywhere from $33 to $500, and most patients, like I said, are receiving this multiple times per year. And the PCR reimbursement program can provide up to $1,000 for testing costs during the enrollment period. And it's open to individuals with or without insurance, and it's to help make sure that patients are actually requesting and getting PCR testing on a regular schedule. So if you have any questions, please give us a call. Next slide. And then just finally, information on our one-to-one support. As Ashley mentioned when she introduced me, I am an information specialist for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. We have, there are 10 of us throughout the U.S. Our hours, we are available 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So there's several ways to connect with us, either by email at infocenter@lls.org. There's a live chat capability link on our website, and always by phone at 1-800-955-4572. And that would be it for me, and I really want to say thank you for the opportunity. And now I'm happy to hand it over to Margaret.
Thank you, Gail, for that wonderful presentation about the facts and also the resources at LLS. And welcome to our guest today. I know you're here to learn some important steps you can take to stay strong on your CML journey. Next slide. Just a little holiday humor as we're getting ready to go into Thanksgiving. Here the cartoon says, "I vote we throw caution to the wind," as the couple is looking at several types of turkeys for their Thanksgiving dinner. We all know that food comes in many types and sizes, so let's see how nutrition can help you. Next slide. We've got 3 objectives today for our nutrition portion of our webinar. First, I'd like to show you how food can help you build strength. Next, we'll look at some nutrition and food strategies to help you manage the side effects from your CML treatment and medications. And finally, we'd like to check out some more online resources. Now, let's look how nutrition fits into your lifestyle to help you build strength on your journey. Next slide. As you see in this diagram, nutrition can fit into your lifestyle to help build strength on your CML journey. Nutrition, along with other aspects of your life, such as adequate fluids, maintaining a healthy weight for you, and your social support can all contribute to your improved strength for your CML journey. And we talk about the journey because it is a journey. During treatment, we want to have very improved outcomes, such as completing the treatment plan that you and your healthcare team agree upon. Strength for meeting your medical appointments is also important. Having strength for your activities of daily life, like dressing, cooking, maintaining your environment, and being social are also important. And of course, we want to use nutrition to help support immunity. Next slide. Now, we've heard from Gail's presentation a thorough list of some possible side effects from the CML medications. I hear about these issues often from the CML clients with whom I speak. Some of these side effects are nutrition related and some are not. But we are going to focus today on some nutrition related side effects. Next slide. There we go. We've got some of our other side effects showing up here. Thank you. There are several treatments for CML and with several different types of medications and procedures. So with those come a variety of side effects. Side effects can slow you down or prevent you from eating, or they may be so severe that they could cause a break in your treatment schedule, which reduces the improved outcomes we were speaking about earlier. Some side effects are temporary, most of them are, and can be dealt with some food strategies, medications, and assistance from your healthcare team. Many of these strategies subside over time and as you complete treatment. The top side effects related to nutrition in the CML clients I speak with are nausea and vomiting, digestive changes, and fatigue. So we're going to touch on these today, as well as the important strategy about the timing of your medication for CML with your meals and beverages. We've touched on the importance of the TKI medications, the tyrosine kinase inhibitor medications. So let's start with that strategy first. Next slide. It's important to take your TKI medications as your healthcare team prescribes. Why, you may ask, isn't a pill just a pill? Well, no, a pill has specific bioavailable actions in your body, and it's vital for you to take it as prescribed to get the most benefit from your TKI medications. We just wanted to touch on two today. Gleevec is to be taken with a meal and a full glass of water. You're not to break the capsule, and if you do accidentally break it or if it gets in your eye or hands, it must be washed immediately. More importantly, Tasiga has some very specific and challenging meal timing instructions. You're to take it on an empty stomach with a full glass of water, and it must be taken at 12-hour intervals. So one example might be 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Might be one schedule. You can have no food 2 hours prior to the medication or 1 hour after you take your dose of the Tasiga medication. If you're not able to swallow the pill, you can open up the contents into a teaspoon of applesauce and take immediately. What are some strategies you can use to help you remember to take your medications on time, such as without food at 12-hour intervals. Well, a lot of people use pen and paper. Alarm clock is very helpful, or a kitchen timer. Nowadays, if you have a smartphone, that can also, you can use your alarm setting on your phone or a sports watch to also help you remember to take your medications and when to eat. Keeping food out of reach 2 hours before you take your medication is another idea, and putting a sign up on your refrigerator in your kitchen area to remind you, no food yet until such and such time. Ask your healthcare team for more suggestions about complying with your medication instructions. Now, let's look at some food strategies to help you manage the nutrition side effects of medication. Next slide. Digestive issues, I think, are some of the most challenging for patients to deal with. Well, what do we really mean when we say digestive issues? Why are they harmful or challenging to deal with? Well, digestive issues deal with how your food moves through your body and how your body releases the nutrients to be absorbed. If your body is compromised and can't do that effectively, you can be at high risk for malnutrition. We know that more than 80% of all patients that are on their cancer journey experience malnutrition somewhere along the line, but treating it and preventing it are very, very important. Digestive issues can also cause a break in treatment and could trigger illness. But these issues are manageable. Don't be afraid to talk about digestive issues with your healthcare team. I know it's not something that you're used to talking about, but keep a side effects log so you can speak with your healthcare team about it, and they might see the patterns you're having. On our website, PearlPoint, we do have a great side effects log you can download. Next slide. The first digestive issue we're going to look at is constipation. What are some strategies to help you relieve constipation? Well, one thing is getting hot beverage and food into your body early as you arise. The temperature, the warm temperature of the tea, coffee, or hot cereal helps stimulate your body's natural digestive systems. So that can be a natural way to help you have a regular bowel movement. Increase your intake of fiber, especially what we call insoluble fiber. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. There are many types of fiber, but insoluble fiber helps resolve constipation and helps you have a regular pattern of bowel movements. If you're not used to eating fiber or you've been ill for a while, go slow in adding fiber. You might just try to up your fiber 5 grams every 3 to 4 days or so. On the nutrition labels of most foods, you'll find what the serving size is and what dietary fiber grams are included. A quick way to add fiber is to throw dried fruits or stir it into your foods like muffins, cereals, sprinkle them on salads. That's a great way. Coming up, we're going to have dried cranberries soon and lots of raisins for our holiday meals, so that's also a good way. Fiber is only helpful if you have adequate hydration. Do remember to drink liquids at least every 2 hours to help activate the fiber. Liquids can be things that we use as beverages. They can be also gelatin, soups, ice creams, puddings can all be considered liquid. Fruits and vegetables also have liquids in them as well. If you're approved for physical activity, move or walk daily if you can. Even walking in the house or just taking a few steps outside with assistance, if you're unsteady, can help stimulate a bowel movement. Sip on prune juice, especially at bedtime, or eat 3 to 4 stewed prunes. And talk to your healthcare team about laxatives, stool softeners, and the role of probiotics to help you relieve constipation. Next slide. If you're experiencing constipation, bloating, and gas can be an unpleasant thing, so I just included this slide to show you some things that often trigger gas or bloating, and you might want to avoid those. Coffee, caffeinated beverages, spicy foods like peppers, and gas-forming foods, or high-fat foods can also cause gas and bloating. Next slide. Now, we did refer to insoluble fiber as a great way to help you resolve constipation. Insoluble fiber is not digested or broken down by the body, so it works from your mouth all the way through your colon to help you have regular bowel movements. It helps your bowel, your fecal material stay in a nice capsule all together, so it moves through your system in one soft piece. Foods that have a majority of insoluble fiber are things like wheat and corn bran, seeds, peels, and nuts, grapes, raisins, and also vegetables like celery, broccoli, carrot, onion, tomatoes, and greens of all type, and also brown rice. So insoluble fiber, if you have them several servings throughout the day, plus fluid, can help you prevent and relieve constipation. Next slide. Next, let's switch gears and talk about another nutrition side effect, diarrhea. Diarrhea may be a side effect of your medication that we just learned about. And a main strategy is to try to replenish the fluid that you lose while you're having these rapid bowel movements. Part of the strategy is to eat 5 to 6 times a day, or to have 5 to 6 at least liquid replenishing episodes a day. Do drink liquids after each diarrhea event that are readily absorbed, like ginger ale, water, popsicles, or some of the sports drinks. You can make your own electrolyte recovery recipe at home if you'd like, instead of buying some of the sports drinks. You can use 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 8 teaspoons of sugar, and 4 cups of water mixed with 3 tablespoons of a juice concentrate, like a frozen juice concentrate like grape, orange, pineapple, apple, whatever you'd enjoy. And you can mix that up in a large glass container or plastic and drink on that after you have an incident. Avoid very cold and hot things that might stimulate a bowel movement, like cold and hot beverages, high fiber items like a salad or a high fiber bar. Milk sometimes can cause diarrhea if you become lactose sensitive. Caffeinated beverages, high sugar and spicy and sorbitol sweetened items all seem to draw a lot of fluid into your digestive tract, and that can trigger future diarrhea episodes. Now, what is sorbitol? Sorbitol is an artificial sweetener that's found in gums, chewing gum, and some of our sugar-free candies, as well as in some of our snack bars. So if you're experiencing diarrhea, be sure you're not using those items. A good caveat is to have a diarrhea and constipation plan from your healthcare team, and to contact your doctor or healthcare team if diarrhea persists more than 24 hours. It can be a medical emergency. Next slide. Diarrhea can be, as you are adding food back to your meals, soluble fiber can help slow down diarrhea. Soluble fiber is digested by the body. It helps resolve diarrhea. Some examples of food with soluble fiber are oat cereal, like oatmeal or oat flakes, lentils, like dried beans and peas, and certain fruits, like apples, pears, oranges, berries, and bananas. Some people like to peel those, like apples and pears, or use applesauce or pear sauce. Vegetables also have soluble fiber, like cucumbers and carrots, and puffed rice, rice cereals, rice bars are all great sources of soluble fiber, as well as applesauce, banana, or banana chips. Now, so just remember the two types of fiber. Soluble helps resolve diarrhea. Insoluble helps resolve constipation. Next slide. If you're wondering what to eat, if your tummy is upset, it helps to have a gentle or a list of gentle or soft foods. And here's just a few. Low acid juices that are helpful to some people, like cherry, grape, cranberry, or apple juices. Cooked vegetables, trying to avoid the gas-forming ones that we call cruciferous, like broccoli and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, or cabbage. White bread, bagels, crackers, and cereals are great if you're recovering from diarrhea. Pastas, canned fruits, and light syrup, or you can wash the syrup off. Cooked meats that are not fried but might be baked, boiled, or stewed. Broths and soups made with broths, and light desserts like angel food cake, frozen yogurt, puddings if you can tolerate milk and lactose, ices, and plain cookies. Be sure to stock your pantry with some of these foods, or give this list to a friend or family member that wants to grocery shop for you. Next slide. Now we're going to change gears and talk about the side effect called nausea. There's several ways to change your foods to help you deal with nausea. One is to change the timing of your foods. Sometimes the folks I speak with say they just stop eating when they have nausea. That can make nausea worse. So do try to find something you can tolerate. Every 3 or 4 hours, do try to have a little mini meal or mini snack. What could that consist of? Well, it can be the gentle foods we just talked about, or a dry carbohydrate that helps absorb some of the gastric juices your tummy makes every hour, like toast, crackers, dry cereal, pretzels, breadstick, ginger cookies, or ginger candy. Try to make a meal plan so that you know what to reach for, or anyone that's helping you with your meal preparation will know what to offer you. And include around that meal plan what your medication plan might be as well. Next slide. Examples of some light meals might be ginger tea with some cookies, or a half a sandwich with a small glass of juice, cheese and crackers, or cereal with milk. Maybe you just want a light snack in the afternoon. Well, vegetable sticks with a dip that you enjoy and can tolerate is a great snack. Or a mini meal might be fruit and cottage cheese. A later night snack might be hummus with baked chips. If you're not up to eating when you have nausea, think about having a smoothie or just drinking a liquid nutrition drink that's fortified. Next slide. Another way, a strategy to use, is to think about how your food is prepared to help you reduce the risk of nausea or help you combat nausea if you have it. One is to try to limit the aroma of food. You can do that by not eating in or near the kitchen where the food is prepared. Use straws for your beverages and covers for food containers. In other words, instead of using family-style eating where all the food is on the table, you might serve from the stove or the kitchen counter and then cover up the food during the meal. Try to find new foods that you can tolerate. As you go through treatment, some of your favorite go-to foods may suddenly not taste very well. So be adventurous and try to find some new flavors that you might enjoy. Change up flavors. If nausea is triggered by meat flavors, which tend to be bold, we'll try some fruit flavors or a mild potato flavor or something mild like rice or pasta. If metallic tastes are triggering nausea, try plastic utensils and cups. If food preparation aroma is a real problem, go for a takeout meal every now and then, or ask a friend or neighbor to bring a meal into you. And eat cool foods, foods with low temperatures. They have the least aroma, like sandwiches, fruit trays, cheese and crackers, fruit and cottage cheese, things without much aroma. Hot foods or foods with warm temperatures make steam, and that steam carries the aroma to your face, which can, in some people, trigger nausea. Next slide. Well, let's think of some things that you can do to find some cool foods with a low aroma. Some people find starting the meal with a cool appetizer helps limit nausea and also address any mouth pain you might have. Use smoothies, ices, or milkshakes. They usually are very low aroma. Think about cool foods that you might like and share them with your whoever grocery shops or helps you cook. Fruit, nuts, sandwiches, yogurt, cold soups, all are great ideas. If you're doing your own grocery shopping, stick to the cold and frozen food aisles and try to stay away from the deli and the food demonstration areas where the food aroma is quite high. If you have trouble eating fruit, freeze small pieces of fruit such as berries, cherries, or chunks of grapes, bananas, pears, and melon balls, and eat them for dessert or appetizer. Next, our next side effect we're going to talk about is fatigue. Fatigue during treatment for CML is different from fatigue in everyday life. Sometimes we think we have fatigue because of all we're going through, which is very much a reason. So it's a challenge to fit healthy foods around that busy schedule. Some clients I speak with have 2 to 3 appointments a day, and then they're too tired to eat. So try to find some easy foods that you can carry with you or have around so you are able to have a small snack or a mini meal every 3 to 4 hours. Check your routine to make sure you're getting enough fluid. Everyone's fluid goal is different. You know, some people might need 32 ounces of fluid a day, and others might need 64 or 72 ounces. So ask your healthcare team about that. When possible, to increase your energy, try to add protein to most meals if you can. What is protein? Well, that's food from the meat group, like beef, chicken, fish, pork, turkey, and foods from the dairy group, including eggs, and vegetables like dry beans and other types of veggies are great non-meat sources of protein. Have a liquid nutrition drink that's fortified on hand if you're not hungry for real food. And think nutritious. Most of the time, if you're able to choose some healthy foods, that's going to help you recover and keep your strength up. Not to say you can't ever have a treat or have something like desserts or something fancy like candy, but don't let those sweet treats take the place repeatedly of healthy foods. And do choose food to get your nutrition primarily. Don't depend on dietary supplements to keep you healthy. And if your fatigue persists, do ask your healthcare team for assistance. Next slide. The final side effect that we would like to review today about nutrition is edema. What is edema? Well, edema can be thought of as the fluid accumulating in your body in larger amounts than is healthy for you. It can accumulate around your heart, your lungs. A lot of people have seen it just in general life in their lower extremities, like your ankles and legs, but it can affect how that organ works and diminish or decrease the effectiveness of that organ if you have too much fluid around that body part. Your healthcare team and physician will probably give you some dietary or nutrition suggestions to follow. Often they may revolve around measuring fluid and possibly reducing it and having a daily goal. So be sure to ask your physician, the healthcare team about that, if that would help you resolve your edema. Another idea is to try to take in less amounts of sodium. In extreme edema, you might be on a 1,200 milligrams sodium restriction per day, or maybe 1,000 milligrams per day. So you could break that up into 3 meals a day or 6 small meals. If it was 1,200 milligrams a day and you were planning 3 meals, that would add up to 400 milligrams of sodium per meal per day. Up your fresh foods, like fresh fruits, vegetables, and yogurt, have little sodium. It just carries the sodium that Mother Nature put there, which is usually just a great low amount. And ask your healthcare team for help as well. If you do have to restrict the amount of fluid or beverages you take, a lot of people get a large pitcher and put that in their refrigerator filled up with the goal, the maximum fluid you could have per day. One common restriction maximum is 32 ounces of fluid in soups or beverages a day. So each time you would drink 8 ounces of milk or soup, you could pour that amount out of the measured jug that you have in your refrigerator, so you would know how far you are along in your allowance for the day. Other people like to write it down on pen and paper, what they eat and how many ounces they have. So that is helpful as well. Next slide. So in summary, nutrition in CML, you can use the SMART acronym. S can be see yourself enjoying food. As we see ourselves enjoying food and being able to eat things that give us strength, you're more likely to have a better appetite. So see yourself enjoying food in a positive light. M, make nutrition a priority. Although it's difficult when you don't feel well or have many appointments or a lot to remember, do think about nutrition as an integral part of your treatment plan. A, reach for the foods or aim for the foods that you like. There is no one perfect diet for CML. There are really no bad foods. So try to include the foods that you like. R, remind yourself to take medications on time. Use any reminders that work for you, like a kitchen timer, your smartphone, or an alarm clock. And finally, talk with your healthcare team. Have good conversations and communicate well with them about your side effects. And ask for a referral to a registered dietitian nutritionist that works often with oncology patients. Next slide. Finally, I just wanted to share with you a few additional resources that are evidence-based for nutrition in CML. Of course, our website, mypearlpoint.org, cancer.org, AICR.org. If you are in search of a registered dietitian nutritionist, you can find one at the website eatright.org. And then oncologynutrition.org is also an excellent website. Well, now I'll turn it back to Ashley, our moderator. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for both of our speakers for their useful and informative presentations. Join us for our next webinar on Tuesday, December 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for nutrition strategies and tips for prostate cancer. For even more help with side effect management, download our free mobile app to your smartphone or tablet. The Cancer Side Effects Helper app is available on iTunes and Google Play. The app offers quick tips to help you manage side effects such as nausea, fatigue, and change in taste and smell, all at your fingertips. Now let's take some questions. We have a couple here. One person asked, why is it important to see a CML expert?
I guess that one's for me. It's really important to see a CML expert because CML in the big scheme of things, CML as a form of blood cancer is a relatively rare cancer. And so you want to see a physician or an oncologist, oncologist, who has a lot of experience with CML. So knows the importance of side effect management, knows how to carefully adjust medication dosage, knows all the milestones, and just really has a huge wealth of experience to draw on in treating patients. Thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you. Another question, what can be done to help manage some of the side effects from the tyrosine kinase inhibitors?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Okay, can you repeat it? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
What can be done to help manage some of the side effects from the tyrosine kinase inhibitors?
Managing the TKIs. I think Margaret actually covered several of them, including the nausea, the fatigue, the digestive issues, the the edema, and I think so. There's a lot of nutritional strategies that can be used. There's a lot of timing strategies that are very important. One thing I know some patients do is, and I think we referred to this a little bit, is have a Gleevec sandwich. So they'll have a little bit to eat, then they'll take their Gleevec, then they'll have the rest of their meal so that the medication is sandwiched between. Especially with Tasigna, it would be very, very important to make sure that they're taking it exactly on the schedule. And then there are some, medical strategies to handle some of the side effects. For example, I know some patients may have an anti-nausea medication that they're taking so that they can actually use the TKI. But I think there's a lot of nutritional strategies, and a CML expert would be very familiar with some of the strategies to reduce the side effects of TKIs as well. Thank you.
All right. Also, what kind of research is LLS supporting in the area of CML?
I think one of the really important things is to emphasize that the TKIs are a relatively new treatment option. I've been with the Society 15 years, and I remember when I first came in 2001, the Gleevec was approved, 2001, spring of 2001. And in the big scheme of things, that's only 14 years. It was called STI 571 when I first came in because it was still in clinical trial. And now to see that we have not only Gleevec passing through its patent, but now that we have a second and third generation drugs, we have research going on. LLS supported a lot of the initial research for some of the CML treatments, and I think it's a very exciting era for CML patients. When I first came in, the average overall was 3 to 5 years, and now, as we know, CML patients' survival is approaching that of the general population. That's huge. Thank you. Thanks, Ashley.
Great. I have one for Margaret. Should I use the spiced turmeric in my food? I've heard it's good.
That's a great question. Turmeric is an Indian spice. The active ingredient or component is curcumin. That's a polyphenol, and it is thought to be to help reduce inflammation in the body. Of course, inflammation can be a trigger for chronic diseases as well as weaken our ability to fight cancer. So curcumin or turmeric is thought to be helpful in that way. Also, it may inhibit the formation of blood supply to a growing tumor. More research is needed. I would caution you, it's thought to be generally safe as we use it in food. I would not use them as dietary supplements unless they were approved by your healthcare team, because especially turmeric and garlic can interfere with some anticoagulant medication or bleeding taking anti-bleeding medication. So check with your physician or physician team before you use any dietary supplements, but it's generally thought to be safe in small amounts in the food we eat. Great question.
Right, great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Remember, you can visit mypearlpoint.org for more resources for your cancer journey.